The radar operator saw it first. A flurry of motion, then a cascade of alarms. Dozens of unmarked contacts had appeared on the screen, small, fast-moving, and low to the water. At first, it looked like clutter, noise, a glitch, but the patterns held. They were real. Dozens of skiffs, 31 in total, were approaching the USNS Supply from multiple angles. No lights, no transponders, no radio response. Within seconds, the officer of the deck declared general quarters. The ship went from calm to combat readiness in under a minute. This wasn't a destroyer or a cruiser. The Supply was a logistics ship designed to carry fuel and ammunition, not to fight off maritime assaults. And yet, in this moment, it stood alone. The closest escort, the USS Mason, was nearly an hour away. The crew, a mix of Navy personnel and civilian mariners, scrambled to arm .50 caliber mounts and activate point defense systems manually. Below decks, others sealed compartments and prepared for fire or breach. On the bridge, the commanding officer hailed the Fifth Fleet. Multiple fast boats, no ID, bearing 135. They're closing fast. Outside, in the black water, the skiffs moved like sharks, silent, coordinated, swift. Some carried ladders. Others had mounted weapons. A few flashed laser pointers across the hull. The first contact crossed inside 2,000 yards, then 1,200, then 900. The crew waited for the order to fire. None came yet. Then a single skiff broke ahead of the pack, moving fast, heading directly for midships. The command deck of the USNS Supply was locked in a frozen calculus. The skiff, now at 400 yards, wasn't drifting. It was accelerating. The radar confirmed its trajectory, straight for the hull amidships. The commanding officer, standing over the navigation console, requested immediate rules of engagement ROE clearance from NavCent. The reply would have to come through encrypted satellite uplink, a 10-second lag in peacetime. But now, every second felt like an eternity. Around him, sailors watched. No one moved. No one fired. A single wrong call could escalate things beyond control. But doing nothing, that was no longer an option. Aboard the ship, the bridge crew cycled through loudspeaker warnings in English, Arabic, and Somali. Still, no reply. Just static and the high-pitched buzz of engine revs. Below, the .50 caliber gunners tracked the lead skiff through crosshairs, their fingers millimeters from the trigger. The deck seethed with silent tension. Then, over the comms, the encrypted reply arrived. Hostile intent confirmed. ROE authorized. Engage. The order hadn't even been repeated before the starboard gun mount erupted in thunder. The first burst of .50 caliber fire sent tracer rounds stitching across the water just ahead of the oncoming boat. The rounds sparked off the surface in orange arcs. The skiff didn't alter course. Whoever was piloting it wasn't bluffing. A second machine gun joined in, this time finding the front hull. The impact caused the bow to splinter, sending up a plume of smoke and fiberglass. The boat veered hard to port, trailing flames, but another two skiffs immediately filled the gap. The attack wasn't stopping, it was evolving. The CRAM system, now active and manned under manual override, spun its turret toward the densest radar cluster. Its sensors locked onto a fast-approaching boat on the starboard stern. A click, a whine, then a shriek of igniting rockets. The CRAM fired. The missile streaked from its pod and detonated in a flash of fire and compressed thunder. The target vessel disintegrated mid-wave, sending wreckage airborne. The blast lit the scene like a lightning strike. It was the first hard kill of the night. Yet even with the strike, more boats kept coming. The ship's forward cameras recorded a swarm of 10 or more skiffs sweeping in from the northeast. The supply vessel was never designed for this kind of combat. Her crew, trained in logistics, now found themselves in sustained contact with coordinated maritime aggression. With the USS Mason still more than 20 minutes away, the defense of the ship rested entirely on those aboard. The pirates changed tactics. Some boats accelerated erratically to confuse the sea-wide US tracking. Others stayed in close pairs, hoping to split targeting decisions. On deck, sailors carried extra ammo belts to gun positions while others scanned the flanks with night vision scopes, marking fresh threats. The captain barked orders to hold fire until targets passed 700 yards. It was a tightrope. Defensive fire without provoking international scrutiny for excessive force. But as more boats crossed the 600-yard line, armed and unresponsive, there was no doubt. The ROE clock was ticking, and the enemy was closing. By the 18th minute of sustained contact, the situation had entered an entirely new phase. The initial waves had tested the ship's perimeter and drawn defensive fire. Now the attackers were pushing hard toward close quarters engagement. A cluster of 6 skiffs broke formation, accelerating directly toward the port side. They were low in the water, loaded with fuel drums, tires strapped to the hulls, clearly built for ramming. One vessel bore an open deck stacked with grappling ladders. Another had a pair of men with RPG launchers shouldered and steady. The bridge radioed for confirmation. Were these boats intending to board? The response from NavCent came faster this time. If they breached the hull, use all means necessary. On deck, the air was thick with haze and adrenaline. The gunners adjusted fire arcs to close-range suppressive bursts. The Sea Ram was held in check, too dangerous to fire now with friendly crew in the line of sight. The ship's M2 teams took the brunt. Each .50 caliber gun was delivering cyclic fire at maximum rate, barrels glowing, brass casings clattering to the deck. But 3 skiffs made it through the barrage. One slammed against the mid-hull port side, wedging under the lifeline deck. The boarding party moved fast. 4 men armed with machetes and SMGs started climbing the ship's netting. The alarm for close combat breach was sounded. Security teams deployed instantly. 2 master-at-arms rushed to the breach site with M4s and riot gear. On the catwalk, a deck engineer and supply tech joined in, using fire axes and improvised tools. The first pirate to crest the railing was shot in the chest at point blank. A second threw a smoke grenade that billowed black across the deck. Chaos exploded in confined space. Shots rang out. A sailor screamed, struck in the shoulder. A third pirate managed to grab a crew member before being tackled and neutralized. The rest dropped back into the skiff, now riddled with holes and leaking fuel. At the same time, another breach attempt came from the stern. This one was repelled by concentrated fire from the aft gun mount, but not before 2 pirates hurled Molotov cocktails toward the superstructure. One bottle hit a bulkhead, igniting a patch of cables. Damage control sprang into action, foam suppression systems kicking in as smoke billowed aft. The skiff that launched the firebombs was blown apart seconds later by a CUS burst, sending shrapnel raining into the sea. The supply was still afloat but wounded. Several crew members had sustained non-fatal injuries. The outer decks were scorched, strewn with shell casings, spent magazines, and blackened equipment. And the attackers weren't done. From the northeast, a second larger wave was emerging on radar. At least 10 new contacts fanned in wide formation. The Sea Ram's radar swiveled, painting targets. But even as targeting solutions queued up, one voice echoed across the command deck. "Where the hell is Mason?" At 3:12 hours, after nearly 40 minutes of intense defense, the radar signature everyone had been praying for finally arrived. From the southeast, slicing through the black water at flank speed, came the USS Mason DDG-87, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer. Her radar profile lit up the CIC like a flare. The command deck erupted with restrained cheers. Aegis was here. Firepower had arrived. But even as relief surged through the crew of the USNS Supply, the battle was still very much in motion. The pirates were now fully committed. Another wave of skiffs had breached 900 yards, and no one was waiting anymore. The Mason didn't hesitate. As soon as the ship was within range, its Aegis combat system kicked into full engagement mode. SM-2 surface-to-air missiles were prepped for area suppression, but for immediate deterrence, it started with a show of shock and awe. The 5-inch Mark 45 deck gun opened up, firing illumination and proximity-fused high-explosive shells. The first rounds landed just forward of the approaching pirate swarm. The ocean flashed white. Shockwaves rippled across the surface. Some skiffs veered off immediately. Others tried to press through, riding low and hard. In coordination, the Mason launched a pair of RQ-20 Puma drones for overwatch. Their infrared and electro-optical feeds painted the entire battle space in real time. Targets were marked and categorized. Those still approaching, those fleeing, and those floating disabled. The destroyer's fire control team worked quickly, queuing up firing solutions. A barrage of warning shots followed, directed near clusters of boats still advancing toward the supply. The intention was clear: stop, turn, surrender, or be destroyed. Several boats cut engines, hands went up, but others, 2 then 4, accelerated, aiming for the Mason herself. It was suicidal. The destroyer's close-in weapon system came alive. The Phalanx U.S. roared like a mechanical banshee, spewing 20mm tungsten rounds at 4,500 rounds per minute. The nearest skiff disappeared into splinters. A second boat was flipped upside down by a near-miss blast. The water turned black with smoke. Some pirates leapt into the sea, flailing for survival. Others floated motionless. Back aboard the Supply, the crew switched from combat to containment. Damage control sealed bulkheads. Medics moved injured sailors to triage zones on the lower decks. Ammunition was being redistributed in case of another wave, but the immediate threat had begun to break apart. The arrival of the Mason had changed the psychological battlefield. For the first time in nearly an hour, the defenders had the upper hand. Yet there was no time to relax. The radar still showed multiple vessels maneuvering on the fringes. Smoke obscured line of sight. The air reeked of oil, fire, and adrenaline. Debris floated between the two ships. As the Mason moved to a blocking position between the Supply and the remaining contacts, the comms buzzed again. This time, a new signal from 5th Fleet Command. Be advised, potential third contact group moving in from 050 degrees. The fight wasn't over, not yet. At 3:18 a.m., the third contact group was confirmed. 10 new radar signatures approaching in a staggered fan from the northeast, smaller than the first waves, but faster and spread wider. They weren't bunched. They weren't probing. This was a deliberate final push, likely intended to overwhelm the Mason while the Supply remained exposed. The destroyer pivoted immediately. Fire control teams queued up a mix of countermeasures, chaff bursts, flares, and another SM-2 launch if needed. But this time, the pirates weren't coming in blind. Two of the new contacts broadcast radio signals, encrypted burst on military frequencies. Someone on those boats knew how to jam, and more dangerously, how to mask position. Inside the CIC of the Mason, a new level of tension took hold. This wasn't random chaos anymore. This was coordinated, possibly trained. The XO ordered the U-team to engage in active scanning, pulsing jamming signals of their own to scramble pirate coordination. At the same time, the Mason launched a pair of Mark 38 Mod 3 autocannons into firing position. These 25mm cannons, gyro-stabilized and camera-guided, began peppering the waterline paths of the incoming boats. Direct hits weren't required. Concussive blasts near the hull would flip or disable skiffs. 3 boats were knocked out in under a minute. The rest scattered, breaking formation. The Sea-Ram fired again. Another direct hit vaporized a boat that had managed to flank toward the Supply's bow. The detonation showered both ships with a fine mist of saltwater and debris. On board the Supply, gunners reloaded magazines while others dumped spare ammo cans over to the destroyer via line transfer. Below deck, medics were now treating over a dozen wounded, none critical, but several with burns and lacerations from flashbangs, shattered equipment, and flying metal. Orders were barked over internal comms. No one relaxes until every contact drops off radar. By 3:27, the third wave faltered. A few boats stopped engines and raised hands. Others turned tail and sprinted into open sea, trails of black smoke behind them. 2 tried to blend into civilian fishing lanes, unsuccessfully. The Mason's RQ-20 drones tagged them, and warning shots brought both vessels to a stop. RE teams were dispatched. Armed sailors boarded the skiffs, finding crates of AKs, fuel, and encrypted radios. 4 men were arrested, zip-tied, and secured on deck. 1 refused orders and reached for something. He was immediately dropped by a burst from a deck-mounted M240. As dawn approached, both ships remained on full alert. The sky above the Red Sea began to lighten, revealing a mosaic of oil slicks, broken wood, and torn fiberglass. The water shimmered with metallic debris and discarded gear. The pirate swarm had collapsed, but the questions it left behind loomed larger than the battle itself. Where had they come from? Who coordinated them? And why risk a direct confrontation with 2 U.S. Navy warships? For the moment, there were no answers, just the wreckage of a battle neither ship had expected, but both had survived. At 4:02, the last radar contact faded from the screen. What had begun as a seemingly chaotic pirate ambush had evolved into a full-scale maritime assault, and now it was over. The silence that followed felt unreal. No gunfire, no engines, just the crackle of radios and the hum of shipboard systems returning to standby. The USNS Supply had withstood the unthinkable. 31 hostile vessels, dozens of armed pirates, multiple direct contact attempts, and not a single sailor lost. but survival came at a cost. The Supply's decks were scorched, its sides dented and blackened by blasts, its crew rattled but standing. The command team moved quickly to initiate battle damage assessment, hull integrity checks, systems diagnostics, ammunition inventory, medical triage. Portable lights illuminated sections of the superstructure that still smoked from Molotov hits. Damage control crews walked silently across blood-streaked decks, logging impact points and collecting fragments for intel. In the lower decks, medics cleaned wounds, reset dislocated joints, applied burn gel, and distributed water. The crew's silence spoke volumes. Exhaustion, adrenaline, and something deeper, a grim awareness that this wasn't random piracy. This had been planned. On board the USS Mason, the debrief began before the sun fully rose. CIC officers analyzed drone footage frame by frame. Each hostile boat was tagged, matched with pre-existing pirate profiles from prior intel drops. A pattern began to emerge: similar paint, hull shapes, radio behaviors. Several contacts matched vessels that had previously been spotted near Yemeni waters or Somali militia-controlled zones. Naval intelligence flagged the encrypted radio bursts. Those weren't homemade. They came from military-grade equipment, likely rerouted through black market channels. One analyst summed it up quietly. This was no fishing fleet gone rogue. This was a coordinated maritime strike group. Orders came down by 0430. The Mason was to remain on station for 2 more hours, conducting SAR search and recovery for debris, weapons, or bodies. The Supply would begin slow transit back toward safe waters under escort. A replenishment ship would rendezvous within 18 hours. Meanwhile, RHIB teams continued their sweeps. One final skiff was found, abandoned and half-submerged. Inside, maps, encrypted sat phones, and a laminated sheet of NATO ship silhouettes. It was a hit list. By the time the sun rose fully, the crew of both ships stood at parade rest on their respective decks, arms crossed, eyes forward, no celebration, only steel resolve. They had endured a battle no one had anticipated, and yet, somewhere beyond the horizon, others might be watching, calculating, studying, waiting, because modern naval warfare doesn't always come with warning shots. Sometimes it starts with silence and ends with steel. By 5 a.m., the Red Sea was still. The smoke had thinned, the fires had gone out, and the last of the wreckage bobbed quietly between 2 American warships. On the surface, it looked like a victory. The USNS Supply had survived a coordinated maritime assault by 31 hostile vessels. The USS Mason had arrived in time to prevent the final breach. Dozens of pirates were dead or captured, and both ships would return to port under their own power. But what lingered in the minds of every sailor wasn't the sound of gunfire. It was the quiet afterward. Naval analysts would later call it a near-perfect example of hybrid maritime warfare. Irregular combatants swarming fast attack boats, encrypted communications, advanced jamming, civilian disguises, and real-time coordination. No nation claimed responsibility. No pirate leader came forward, but the intent had been clear. Probe U.S. naval defense, expose vulnerabilities, record the response. The laminated NATO silhouette chart confirmed it. This had been reconnaissance disguised as piracy, a simulation with real blood, the kind of threat that's harder to detect than a missile, and just as deadly if ignored. For the crew of the Supply, this event would mark a turning point. Dozens of sailors would receive commendations for bravery. Some would be reassigned to fast response security teams. Others would carry the weight of this battle into their next deployments. The lesson was simple. The line between logistics and combat no longer exists. Every ship is a target, every patrol a test. In the years to come, the incident would be studied at war colleges and naval academies as a case study in decentralized asymmetric warfare. But that night, on that steel deck under foreign stars, it was just survival. Just men and women holding the line. If you believe stories like this matter and that we must understand modern war before it happens again, subscribe, like, and comment to support the channel.